Hello and welcome back. So, we all know what today is. It is the day of the league's free agency period opening. So, what better way to celebrate than with our off-season previews? This is like Christmas to me almost. I love this time of year. Second to only the trade deadline in terms of like the NBA's peak days, in my opinion. I was more excited for this than the NBA Finals. Even if my team was in it, I'd still be more excited. But let's get into it. So, this is part two. Mason just did part one on the Eastern Conference. I'm going to be doing the Western Conference. We took some different approaches to modeling what we're going to get done here. So sit back and enjoy. It's going to be a little long video, and I hope you guys all like it. So starting off, we're going in order of standings. So we're going to start at the top, make our way all to the bottom, and we're going to start here with the Oklahoma City Thunder. So they finished last season 57 and 25, and were the first seed. However, they lost in the Western Conference semifinals. Couple notable events: their coach Mark Daignault was named Coach of the Year last season, and very recently, about a week ago, they traded Josh Giddey straight up for Alex Caruso. Feels like a move that needed to happen. I believe we covered it a little earlier, and just a team that's looking to contend, and they're making win now moves. Cap space two, 37 million over that. They're fifth in the league in cap space. In terms of draft picks, it doesn't get much better than the Oklahoma City Thunder. They picked Nikola Topic 12th and Dylan Jones at 26th. I think they acquired him. I don't think they picked him, but they got him. And then notable undrafted free agents, they got two. They have Jack Golke and Alex Dukas. Just two of the better. I sifted out some of the undrafted free agents, and those were some of the bigger names, especially following Golke's incredible tournament run. But in terms of notable first round draft picks, there's a bunch when it comes to OKC. They own all of their own first round picks, and they also own Miami's, which is lottery protected. They have Philadelphia's, which is top 6 protected. Utah's is top 10 protected, all next year. And then on top of that, they own 5 additional picks that are either unprotected or conditional, that are tradable. On top of that, so free agency's coming up, and they have a couple players to re-sign. However, none of them are really, you know, key pieces that they would be like bankrupting them if they lost them. Gordon Hayward, Bismack Biyombo, Mike Muscala, Keontae Johnson, just a couple guys that I don't feel they have the need to bring back. They don't really have an exigency to bring those guys back. But Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins, they actually allowed those guys to enter unrestricted free agency. Despite saying RFA here, I still have it down because they have said that they're going to negotiate with those players on long-term deals. So that's good for them. I hope it'll be team benefiting as well as player benefiting, because those are two players that have stuck with OKC and have been kind of crucial. We know Joe for his three-point shooting, and Wiggins is definitely an underrated role player for them. So good for them. And then some expendable contracts: Kenrich Williams at 6.7 million, as well as Ousmane Dieng is 5 million even. Potential targets and needs. There's a couple. They got Klay Thompson. We're gonna have news on him very soon, I feel, and he's already said he's not coming back to the Warriors. We'll see where he signs. This is one of the teams that can offer him more money. Should he sign with Los Angeles, it would be on a taxpayer's mid-level exception, but with a team like OKC, they have cap space. They can sign him right in. Now, I don't know if they want him. We all know that he went over 10 in an elimination game. I don't know if OKC wants that, but him, Andre Drummond too, we've talked about him. Nick Claxton, perhaps by trade. I feel like there's a steep price for him, and I don't know if the Nets would want to part with him, but his contract's kind of big for a player that does what he does. And the biggest one for me is Lauri Markkanen. I talked about this on the other video we did about OKC. Markkanen on this team would pretty much complete the team, and I feel like it gives them another aspect to their roster that will be very hard to defend and just solves a problem that they have. As well as that, I have Dario Saric down, could play backup center, and Najee Marshall, another name to watch. Tough wing, good defender, and can knock down a three. This team, all they need is rebounding, backup big men, and experience. Question I have for them: how will the Thunder address the rebounding problem? That is their fatal flaw, their most crucial issue, and I'd like to see how they take care of that this season in the offseason. So our second team, our second place finisher in the West in the regular season was the Denver Nuggets. They finished 57 and 25, and they lost in the Western Conference semis. key events. So KCP recently opted out of his player option. Looks kind of unlikely based on what the reports have been to come back. So that would be a big blow. And they are inking Jamal Murray to a new extension on the same day. Two things, bringing Murray back is awesome, but losing KCP is definitely going to hurt. They are also 44 million over the cap, so they can't really add, great players, and they're losing KCP basically for nothing here. In terms of draft picks, they drafted Deron Holmes, 22nd, and don't mind the UDFAs. We talked about those. I have some down for some teams, others for other teams. I'm not really going to mention them, but just some guys that you can look at and be like, oh, I remember that guy from college. He was good. So they have those guys down, and future draft picks, they have their own first in 26, 28, 30, and 31. Players to be re-signed. Here we have right here DeAndre Jordan. They actually just re-signed him. They also have Justin Holiday, Vlatko Konkar, and KCP as mentioned. And in terms of expendable contracts, they already got rid of Reggie Jackson. So the next name on the table is Zeke Naji. In terms of potential targets, I feel like DeLon Wright serves a need that they need, and that is backup point guard. While Reggie Jackson is good at times, I don't know if he's a competent guy that can give you all 82 and then 16 after. Like Draymond Green once said, there's 82 game players and there's 16 game players. And I don't know if Reggie Jackson is the guy you want manning your team, your bench rotation in a playoff series. But DeLon Wright, he showed us great stints with the Heat this season. And he's another proven veteran, as well as other guys here. Daniel Tice could be a good backup big man. Danilo Gallinari, again, also a former Nugget himself, and Gordon Hayward. All this team needs is bench depth. If they get a couple pieces there back in contender status, not that they left, but I don't feel scared of them in terms of really stifling the Celtics championship chances if they just lose KCP and get nothing in return. Biggest question, can the Nuggets utilize their vet minimums? This is going to be crucial, as well as other crucial topics like, will Christian Brown, maybe Christian Brown breaks out and we see the Nuggets reach new heights this season, but can they utilize the vet minimums? They're going to need to this season if they want to be successful. Third team here, Minnesota Timberwolves. They finished last season 56-26 and lost in the Western Conference Finals. What a run it was for this team. We have the Nas Reed towels here at the bottom of the screen. This is a team that's really started to build a culture. They're embracing their players. Anthony Edwards had a big breakout last season, and the Timberwolves completely ran the awards. Chris Finch was named Coach of the Year, Gobert Defensive Player of the Year, and Nas Reed obviously was our 6th Man of the Year. Kudos to all those players. In terms of cap situations, however, it's not as awarding. They're about $120 million over the cap, which you might be asking how that's possible. I am too. They are definitively a second apron team and will feel the restrictions of such. In terms of draft picks, they actually had a stellar draft. So they traded for Rob Dillingham, and we know what he brings to the table. He's an ultra shifty offensive powerhouse, and he's going to be backing up Mike Conley this season. And towards the future, this is looking like a guard of the future. They did have to give up a pick swap and an unprotected first, so they're going all in on this current roster plus Dillingham. But I like the move. They also got maybe the steal of the draft in Terrence Shannon Jr. at 27th. At Illinois, one of the best college players this year. There was some allegations going on with him, but he recently had those cleared, and he's ready to go to the NBA, and I think he will provide valuable bench play for the Timberwolves this season. Future draft picks, nothing there, though. Players to be re-signed, there's a couple names here. Monte Morris, Kyle Anderson, Jordan McLaughlin, TJ Warren, and Luka Garza. Anderson is really the only big name here. They kind of can't sign any of these guys back. They also have no expendable contracts. There's not really any way for this team to clear money whatsoever, and like I said, they're $120 million over the cap, so Minnesota's going to need to make some tough decisions. And I feel like one of those is just parting ways with these guys. They are going to be another team that has to utilize their mid-level exceptions and their minimums. I don't even know if they can use the mid-level exception based on where their apron status is, but, it's going to be rough financially down the road for Minnesota, especially as the extensions kick in for some of these young guys like Edwards. So I don't expect them to bring these guys back if we're being completely honest. In terms of targets and needs, some vet minimum players here. Cameron Payne, might be a guy you look at, give a flyer to for a six man. Maybe I didn't write him down. Maybe Pat Bev. We all have seen that video of him climbing on the scores table after they won the play-in game. If I was Minnesota, I would welcome him back with open arms. Same thing, Gallinari again mentioned, and Marcus Morris. Marcus Morris, I feel like is probably worth more than a vet minimum, but maybe he sees the contention and he's like, okay, I want to join this team. In terms of needs, they really only need wing depth behind Jaden McDaniels. We know that they have centers. They now have guards. So all they need is that wing depth. Big question for them. How does Minnesota navigate the second apron? Pretty much everything I just talked about. They're not going to be able to. They're so far gone. And we'll just see how they're able to get around that by using the vet minimum and, filling out the roster. And we'll see ultimately what it ends up looking like. Now on to the Clippers. They finished fourth in the West last season at 51-31, and they lost in the first round. Couple notable events here. Tale of two player options. We have Paul George declining his, but on the same day Russell Westbrook accepted his, about $5 million for him. Shout out Brody for coming back on a cheap deal. He provided about 11-5-5 for Los Angeles last season, and he's a guy who just provides invaluable hustle, and just the momentum that he brings when coming off the bench is truly special, and I'm glad that they got him back. Cap situation, they are $50 million and change over the cap, so that is something to look at. In terms of apron, I don't believe they're under an apron, but should they re-sign James Harden and Paul George, which is looking unlikelier by the day that they retain both of those players, I feel like they will be a lot higher in that mark. In terms of draft picks, only one this season. They got Cam Christie at 43rd, brother of Max Christie from the Lakers. This guy spent a year at Minnesota, put up pretty good numbers in the Big Ten. So for his efforts, he was rewarded with a spot in the NBA. In terms of future draft picks, they are decrepit as a result of the Paul George trade from Oklahoma City. We know what happened. We've been through that trade. Paul George, and in exchange they got Shea, and Jalen Williams was one of the picks, and they still have picks coming in. And then on top of that, they traded for James Harden. So not a lot of picks to go around for this team. And roster makeup too. I would be a little concerned if I was a fan of this team. I'm not going to lie. This is everyone they have contracted right now. We're looking at Harden, Westbrook, and Highland for your point guards. Shooting guards, Terrence Mann and Norman Powell. Small forwards, Amir Coffey and Cam Christie. Power forwards, Kawhi Leonard and PJ Tucker. And center, Ivica Zubac. This is just pretty, it's not looking good for this team. I'll just say that. We're going to need another superhuman run from Kawhi Leonard if this team wants to be any sort of successful. Free agency, a couple players they need to re-sign. They have a team option on Kai Jones, and then they have a couple unrestricted free agents, those being Harden, Paul George, Mason Plumlee, Daniel Tice, and Brandon Boston Jr. Expendable contracts, they do have a couple. Norman Powell is making $19 million this season. Terrence Mann, 11.4. PJ Tucker, 11.5. Potential target / needs, they're just going to, they got to add what they can. They got to add around the edges here. And a couple players I like for them. Gordon Hayward, again, another veteran name. We keep bringing him up. This is a guy that can still give you some bench minutes. Same thing, Eric Gordon. They had him for a little bit. Might bring him back. Sadiq Bey. This is a guy I feel like might be a mid-level exception guy you might want to go after. Proven wing, he's started. Although for not good teams, he has proven to be a starter and can definitely provide rotational minutes. He is coming off a torn ACL, but as a shooter, I don't feel like that really matters all that much. And then Jay Crowder, too, just another shooter. This team's going to need all the help they can get in terms of bench depth. And in terms of needs, I have down youth and multi-season contracts. They have a lot of guys that are going to be free agents next season, and I'm not quite sure they're going to be able to retain all of them. So we'll see what happens here, but Clippers kind of seem to be on the brink of collapse. Biggest question, how successful can they be if they lose Paul George for nothing? My answer, not very successful. They're going to be jumped by a couple teams. I think the Rockets will be better than them this season should they not bring back Paul George. It's scary hours in Los Angeles, I'll just say that. For the 5 seed, we saw the Dallas Mavericks make an improbable run to the NBA Finals, and they couldn't have done it without some of the moves they made during the trade deadline. They brought in Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington, and we saw how that served them. So this offseason is definitely crucial for them based on the fact that they were playing longer than everyone else except the Celtics, and they kind of did so as an underdog, so we know that their roster is not as pristine as some of the other rosters in the West. However, they powered through. They just recently traded Tim Hardaway alongside 3 second-round picks to Detroit for Quentin Grimes. And it was a move to shed cap. However, they're still $40,000 over the cap benchmark. In terms of draft picks, they got Melvin Ajinka, 52nd. This is a guy, make what you want out of him. Same thing with Gerard Lucas being an undrafted free agent. Here's a guy from Nevada who can hit threes. I'm sure everyone could, use him on their summer league roster. And then future draft assets, they have first round picks in 25, 26, and 2031. Note the Stepien rule. I'm not quite sure which ones of those they can deal. I'm sure 2031 is probably, the one they can deal out of those. Free agency, they got two guys they got to bring back, and that's Derrick Jones Jr. and Markieff Morris. They also have to guarantee Dante Exum's money. In terms of how the deals are going to look for these guys, I think Jones is like a mid-level exception type guy. Maxi Kleber is an expendable contract. He's making $11 million. More potential targets and needs. We're looking at DeLon Wright and Alex Len. However, Len just recently signed with the Kings just today, a couple hours ago, so he's off the market. DeLon Wright, we talked about him, where you're going to notice a lot of similar names in this video for vet minimum tier players. These are just guys that are going to be valid rotation pieces, and Dallas could use some of those. In terms of needs, they're going to need bench depth like some of these top teams that are over the cap, and guard stoppers is another thing that they need to look into. We know Luka is an absolute cone, and Kyrie is not much better. So as long as we can get a guard stopper in here, maybe a Pat Bev, this is a team to watch for sure. Biggest question for them, can you win a championship with Luka Doncic as your main option? I'm not closing the door on this entirely. However, it looks pretty bleak following the smackdown that they received in the hands of the Celtics. Although some of the games were competitive, they blew them out one game and made a dashing comeback in the other game. They ultimately fell in 5 games and proved that Boston is just much better constructed. They have better players. Dallas never stood a chance, really. And Doncic is, his play was solid at times, but he can't play defense against high-level players. And it's really questionable whether or not this team will be able to keep building around him for the future. And in terms of keeping him, what are you going to need to put around him in terms of winning the big game? It comes down to, did you win or lose the last game of the season? And for Dallas, I feel like with Luka Doncic as the head honcho, I'm not quite sure that it's ever going to be they won the last game of the season. So that's the big question for them. And yeah. All right, so our next team, which the Mavericks definitely have some experience with, is the Phoenix Suns. So they went 49-33 last season. They were a 6th seed and ultimately lost in the first round to the Minnesota Timberwolves. They did have a couple re-signings already in this early period. They got Bol back, so cheers to them. And they also re-signed Royce O'Neal on a long-term deal. Solid role player, but I'm not sure if he's going to help you win in the regard that this team wants to win. They did also sign Grayson Allen to a big deal at the conclusion of last season, and they got rid of their head coach, Frank Vogel, after one season, and they hired Mike Budenholzer, who has proven he could be a championship coach. He did win one with the Bucks. And in terms of cap, this team is not in a good place. They are $96 million over cap, second apron team. They're going to have some financial restrictions this offseason for sure. In terms of draft picks, present and future, they had a really good draft, actually. They brought in Brian Dunn with the 28th pick, and picture to the right is Oso Ighodaro. These are two stellar defenders, and that's exactly what Phoenix needs. We know that their offense is going to flow, to a degree. They have good ISO players, good one-on-one players, but can they function as a team? We've yet to see it happen, really. But we know the capabilities of their offense, and could be really interesting here with some actual bona fide defensive menaces here with Dunn. His highlight reel is unbelievable, and I know a lot of Suns fans are happy to have him. They got him really low in the draft, and he's on a 4-year rookie deal now. So, player to watch for them in terms of if they're, going to be contending for championships, his cheap contract is going to be one of the driving factors based on the team's success if they succeed with him as a meaningful player. In terms of draft assets, they are cooked beyond repair. They have one tradable first round pick, and they only added a couple second rounders in a trade with Denver for trading back Deron Holmes for Ryan Dunn, basically. But just not looking good for this team. Like I said, between the cap space and the draft picks. Free agency, they got a lot of guys to retain. Josh Okogie, Drew Eubanks, Eric Gordon, and Damian Lee. Those guys actually all already got rid of their player options, so they're looking like they're going to be gone because the Suns cannot exactly re-sign them to big deals. Same thing with Thaddeus Young and Udoka Azubuike. Two more players that are expected to part ways with Phoenix this season. In terms of expendable contracts, they have Nasir Little at $6.8 million, but what does it matter if that's only going to be a small fraction? That's basically a 15th of the money they need to shed. So potential targets plus needs, Bol, they already brought him back, so that's stellar. Monte Morris may be a guy. We saw him with Minnesota. He had some struggles as a lead guard for their bench unit, but I think he could still play valuable minutes. Same thing with Chris Dunn. I didn't list him here, but point of attack defender that is a proven NBA veteran. Providence guy. I'm not going to go into that too much with Dunn, but him, Troy Brown Jr., Mason Plumlee as well. Just some guys I have on that list. And in terms of needs, it's pretty obvious what they need. They need bench depth and definitive point guards. This team, started at their guards. It was Booker and Bradley Beal. And I actually thought that Booker was a pretty solid point guard, but in the playoffs, it was kind of like they didn't really have a facilitator to get the offense going, and we saw their offense really be stunted by the Timberwolves. Biggest question, will this Durant super team last? It's a big three, no doubt, in terms of salary, but is Bradley Beal really, a third option that can be a third option, a contender? The Suns are, always going to be contenders because they have two top 15 players, and that's unassailable, but I don't know what the peak for this team is. Can they make it past the first round? We saw it happen a couple of years ago, but since they acquired Beal, they're 1-out. So next up, we got the Lakers. They were the 7th seed, and they lost in the first round. They finished 47-35 last season. Couple key events. They've had a really interesting offseason so far. LeBron just opted out of his player option. He's looking at a bigger deal, and he's actually eyeing bigger in terms of years, not monetary value. He did say that he wants to see the team improve, and he will take a huge pay cut to do so. So hats off to LeBron. He also got his son drafted to the team, so cheers for a family man like himself. He also got J.J. Redick hired as their coach. Will that work? We'll see. I think it's going to be another Steve Nash scenario. Just didn't really work out there. Couple opt-ins they have as well. Cam Reddish opted in. Jackson Hayes, not mentioned, also opted in. And D'Angelo Russell opted in. This is a team that's coming in hot. We know LeBron might not have that many years left, but he's still an incredible player. Same thing with Anthony Davis. Russell's spotty at times, but they have pieces, and they are only $22.8 million over the cap in practical value, and that's 9th in the league. So they are among the lower teams in terms of those that are over. Present plus future for them. They've had some good picks. They had a really good draft. They brought in Dalton Knecht at the 17th pick. I had him going a lot higher than this, and I feel like he is, in terms of how good a player he is, definitely a lot better than the 17th best player in the draft. He's going to be motivated by this and is a sharpshooter, that has a definitive offensive package, and that's going to be very helpful. Same thing in terms of good picks is Bronny. Just keeping LeBron appeased is all you need if you're the Lakers. So they did that. In terms of future assets, they have their own first-round pick in 29, 30, and 31. So they're going to be dealing those probably, and they also own several second-round picks. Couple players they need to re-sign. LeBron is the main priority here, but they also need to retain Taurean Prince and Spencer Dinwiddie. I say need. They don't need to bring back anyone, but those are two guys that, Dinwiddie, I actually think he might be the worst player in the NBA, so I'm not as sold on him, but Taurean Prince can knock down his shots, and he's an interesting piece. I remember they signed him last year. I was like, oh, watch out, the Lakers just got Taurean Prince. I don't know if we have the same, macho this year, but he's a good player. Expendable contracts, Rui Hachimura is at $17 million, Gabe Vincent $11 million, Jared Vanderbilt $10.7 million, and Jalen Hood-Schifino's at 3.9. He's often been floated as a youth prospect for other teams. They might be, interested. Potential targets and needs. Eric Gordon is a guy that I really like for this team. Just another shooter veteran off the bench. Cam Johnson, maybe a trade piece. You give up, Vanderbilt and, Gabe Vincent maybe for him. Just a really, really interesting piece because I feel like he can play some defense, and he's definitely one of the premier three-point shooters in the league. That's what you need. You need to put shooting around LeBron. And the guy that we're all looking at for this team is Klay Thompson, unrestricted free agent, and it's reported that he's not going back to the Warriors. He will more than likely get a mid-level exception should the Lakers actually want to sign him, and the ties are there. We know his dad played there in the 80s. Michael Thompson was actually the first pick in the draft, believe it or not. But yeah, stout defense too is what this team needs. And the guard defense is weaker than it has been in terms of these past contending Lakers teams we've had in the past, but we're gonna need to rejuvenate that. And I'm not quite sure. Maybe Chris Dunn is another guy you like there. Also a center. Do we move Anthony Davis to power forward and add a center? I'm not quite sure. I actually like him at center, but looking into a center might be something this team needs to do if they want to be successful. Biggest question: how will age affect the outcome of this Lakers season? We have seen this team, kind of regress a little bit in terms of where they were in 2020, and they're going to be adding guys that are on the older end. We know Klay is, an NBA senior citizen at this point. I just mentioned Eric Gordon. He's very old as well. So how will age affect the outcome of this Lakers season? Pelicans, this is the last playoff team we're going to be going over here. They lost in the first round. They got swept by the Thunder. Zion missed the playoffs again. That is the second time that's happened. Key events, they already made their big splash, I feel like, but potentially could we see another move? We might. They traded for DeJounte Murray on June 29th. They also picked up the option on Jose Alvarado. Two incredible defensive guards, and we know Murray's offensive capabilities are there. This is a guy, they said that they added him for their late-game offense, and I completely agree. The more I think about him and McCollum together, at first I wasn't sold on it, but as long as McCollum can make his shots and stay solid on defense, at least be a net neutral, I like this team a lot to improve. And they are a lot over the cap space. They're a first apron team. They're $62 million over. Draft picks, they had a good draft. They got Yves Mizzi. This is a guy who is going to be a good bench center. Should they not bring back someone in, he might be their starting center, which I'm not sure if I like him as much in that scenario. But they also got Josh Adoro playing Summer League for them, just another Providence guy I wanted to shout out. They also have several tradable and swappable future firsts. They gave up their 2027 pick, which was the least favorable with Milwaukee, but they also gave up a Los Angeles pick, but they didn't give up any of their own picks. So the stepping rule is not really going to be in effect with this team, and should they want to make another move, maybe trade Ingram for a bigger star, this is definitely a team that has the potential to add another piece based on their draft picks. Free agency, they got some guys, and I'm not sold they can bring them back. They are severely lacking in the cap space department. We just talked about that. They have to re-sign starting center Jonas Valanciunas, as well as a couple bench guys in Najee Marshall and Cody Zeller. I would not expect to see either of those guys back. I feel like Marshall is due for a big payday. We talked about him with OKC. Just, Zeller maybe as a vet minimum guy, but they're going to lose all those players more than likely. And in terms of expendable contracts, they have none. They just got rid of Larry Nance and Dyson Daniels, who would have been two of those guys, and they're locked into their core of now Murray, CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, who will he be in the core? We'll see. They have a lot of forwards. Zion, Herb, and Trey Murphy III. Potential targets. The most intriguing target for me is James Wiseman. That's a guy who, he didn't really live up to the expectations, but I still think he can be a solid center and maybe a guy you start. They also could bring in a guy like JaVale McGee, proven veteran. Dario Saric also is a shooting big man off the bench. But that's if you're starting Yves Mizzi, and I'm not quite sure that's something you want to do just yet. Another guy, sneaky guy I like here is Jordan Nwora. We saw him with the Bucks earlier in his career. He's since been on Indiana and Toronto. Damian Lee as well, opted out. Just another bench guy you can add. Team needs, they're going to need a Najee Marshall replacement. He is a stout defender, nice 3-and-D guy, and his energy is going to be missed sorely. They also are going to need center depth. Biggest question, will the Pelicans move off of CJ McCollum or Brandon Ingram? I feel like if they trade one, they're not going to trade the other. This is a team that they're already not going to be a high continuity team. They just gave up 2 pieces for 1 piece. And I expect them to move off one of these 2 guys. I think Ingram is definitely the definitive favorite in that regard. But we'll see what ends up happening as free agency opens very soon. At the time I'm recording this, free agency is basically an hour and a half away. So we'll see what ends up happening. Sacramento Kings here. They went 46-36 last season and lost in the play-in game as a 9 seed. Crucial injuries down the stretch, like this guy right here, Malik Monk. But he did re-sign with them, so that's good. He was 2nd and 6th man of the year voting, and is another just proven scorer. He can kind of do a little bit of everything. The Kings did also trade Davion Mitchell and Sasha Vezenkov to the Raptors in a salary dump. They received Jalen McDaniels in return. I don't know if he's that good, but they did clear a lot of money doing that. And literally hours before I just mentioned this, they re-signed Alex Len. They are $28.8 million over the cap, which is not a fatal, amount, but definitely not something you want to be operating in. In terms of draft picks, present and future, they just drafted Devin Carter, shout out. And in terms of undrafted free agents, they added a guy I really like in Boogie Ellis, but this team I just feel like has a lot of guards, and I'm not quite sure where they fit in. I hope that they package a couple of their guards in a deal because I want to see Carter get as much playing time as possible. But they have a lot of guys like Duarte, and they did trade Mitchell, but there's still a lot of guys in front. And in terms of future draft picks, they actually own all of their first-round picks until 2031, and they have a couple second-rounders they can deal as well. So this is a team that if they were, involved in the trade market, maybe, we'll see on the next slide, Kyle Kuzma team, we'll see. What I was talking about with Kuzma is these expendable contracts are going to be very valuable in securing a third option next to Sabonis and Fox, and Barnes, Herter, Lyles combined. That's about $46 million. So if you want a guy like Kuzma who is actually much cheaper, those are guys that you're going to like. And players to re-sign, the list is not that long. It's only Kessler, Edwards, and JaVale McGee, both bench guys. The Mitchell and Vezenkov salary dump shows that there's more there, and I feel like Kuzma is the front runner for this team to acquire. Like I said, they have all their first round picks, and I feel like giving up a pick this year and then 2 years down the road is the move for them. This is a team where if they stick with the roster they have, they're not going to get better. I think the guys they have are what they are, and they're not going to succeed that way. So I think Kuzma is the move, and Lyles and Herter, that matches his contract. So the Mitchell trade was foreshadowing, in my opinion. Here we have our guy Kuzma here as our top target. A couple other guys I like, Taurean Prince, 3-and-D extraordinaire. Chuma Okeke as well, I feel like fits that role. Shout out to all my people that were playing NBA. I think it was NBA 2K22. They had a program called Moments of the Month, and you had to get steals with this Amethyst Chuma Okeke card. If you know, you know. If not, sorry. Bruce Brown is also another guy. They could feasibly add both Bruce Brown and Kyle Kuzma. Brown's option was just picked up by the Raptors. Brown represents, a way to get rid of, unload some of that guard depth. And he's a proven winner. He's won a championship, and he had a fundamental role in that Nuggets championship. In terms of what they need, though, they need wing stoppers. They're going to need defense, and center depth are everything that Sacramento should look to add on this offseason. Their question I have for them, what move can elevate Sacramento to contender status, if any? This is not a team that I forecast winning a championship unless they have like a crazy addition. Like, let's say they add Giannis. I'll be like, look out for the Kings. But I don't feel like that move's on the table for them. I feel like they're going to have to, nickel and dime their way up the ranks. And Kuzma's the guy that I keep mentioning. They could add another guy. But what move can elevate them to contender status? We'll see inevitably what that will be. My Golden State Warriors here, if they finished 46-36 last season, they were a 10 seed who lost in the playing games. Key events as of today, Paul George is reported to be not considering the team, so that's a big blow. And as of 6 p.m. today, they need to decide on Chris Paul's contract Paul is supposed to earn $30 million dollars next season, but they have said that if they do not have any trade suitors for him, they will be waiving his contract effectively. They're 104.7 million over the cap. That is not something you want to see, and they're a definitive second apron team as well. They had a kind of quiet draft. They drafted Quinton Post. I actually don't like this pick. Shooting big man, but the defense is just not there. And if you know this team, you know that they're gonna need defense more than anything. Future draft picks, they own all of their first round picks until 2031, with the exception of 2030. And they also own their second round picks. Free agency, biggest name, maybe one of the biggest names in free agency is Klay Thompson. They're not gonna bring him back, but he is still a free agent. Same thing with Dario Saric. Chris Paul has that non-guaranteed money we just talked about, and Lester Quinones. These are guys that, Quinones played for this team last season, and maybe that's why they, didn't make the playoffs. But just a guy you can maybe bring back 3 years, $9 million maybe. And expendable contracts, they have some in case they want to, make a deal. Andrew Wiggins at $26 million, Kevon Looney at $8 million, and Gary Payton at $9.1 million. Jimmy Butler, still a guy on the table that I'd be interested in. Could the Warriors pull that off? Losing Klay, though, is, going to be a big hit. We know the legacy with them. The big three is no more. But the shooting, he still made about 300 threes last season. Like, that's hard to replace. You're not going to replace that with guys like Lester Quinones. So, best of luck to him wherever he goes. Potential targets and team needs. I say bring back JaVale McGee. This team needs a backup center. They're going to lose Saric for nothing. But McGee is a guy that I really like here to bring back. Same thing with Mike Muscala. He's pretty much does the same stuff as, a Dario Saric type player. Gordon Hayward as well, another name to watch. And then maybe they're a team that's in the Kuzma sweepstakes. He's a guy who, in the right system, I feel like he can be better than he is. So that's another interesting wrinkle to look at. In terms of needs, this team needs defensive-minded bigs as well as rebounders and consistency on cheap deals. Biggest question, will the Warriors ever give Stephen Curry another true co-star? As of today, the option looks like the options are limited, to say the least. And Paul George, I saw the package that they offered. It's a good package. I just feel like the end is near in terms of any window whatsoever. It's, Curry is the only one with his foot in the door. Everyone else is left. Draymond's off podcasting like myself, It's over for this team, quite frankly. And will they give him another co-star to try to contend? We'll see, but I doubt it completely. All right, so Houston Rockets are another interesting team here. They went 41-41 last season. They placed 11th in the West, and they were very competitive the final month of the season. Once Sengun got injured, they actually turned it up a level. Started a little rocky. Offense wasn't really clicking, but the young guys really came on towards the end of the season. And 11th in the West at 41-41 is really just a testament to how hard this team fought and, just how incredible the West was last season. In terms of key events this offseason, they acquired a future Suns first-round pick from Brooklyn in exchange for some of Brooklyn's picks back. Rumored to be in the market for Kevin Durant. Will the Suns want to move on from him? I'm not sure, but, could happen. We've seen crazier in the league. That would be a big addition for sure. And they also traded for AJ Griffin. Now, this is a guy where I've actually been talking about him a little bit. Like, he's a good player, and he didn't get any minutes. He averaged like 8 minutes a game or something crazy last season. He's a guy that I definitely like off the bench for them. They got him for like the 44th pick, so just another addition to this young team already. And they're 8th in cap space. They're only $20 million over, so might be a player in the mid-level exception market for sure. Draft picks present and future. They had one pick this year after trading for AJ Griffin, and they used that pick on Reed Shepherd. One of the trailblazers in terms of three-pointers in today's game, coming out of college. This is a guy who, they're hyping him up a lot, and Houston is in dire need of more shooting. He's a guy that I think fills that role nicely. In terms of draft assets, they own the least favorable first-round pick in 2025, Brooklyn's first in 26, swap rights with Brooklyn in 27, and then their own first in 28 through 31, so not like they have no assets. They definitely have some picks to play with. Rookie deals, too. They have a lot of guys that are on rookie contracts, and a lot of these guys are, second year, third year guys, so they'll have control of their contracts for a while. They have Jalen Green and Sengun are in the last year of their contracts, and Jabari Smith has, I think, 2 years left on his rookie deal. Thompson, AJ Griffin is on the last year of his, and Cam Whitmore. Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore represent an interesting scenario for this team because they've proven to be, viable options in terms of bench play, and the team has them for 3 more years. Whitmore especially is interesting because he was like the 20th pick, so his deal is going to be just really cheap, and it's going to allow the team to be flexible around their young core. Players to re-sign, sorry for the jump scare with Dylan Brooks there. Players to re-sign, they don't really have a lot of names. Reggie Bullock, Aaron Holiday, and Boban Marjanovic. These are guys, Bullock played for them a little bit, but I don't really see him as a big loss should they lose him. They actually, if I'm not mistaken, they might have traded him, so that might just be an error on my part. But expendable contracts, Dylan Brooks at $22 million. That's a guy, if you can get him off the books and add a better player, I would do it by all means. Steven Adams at $12.6 million. They traded for him last trade deadline. I feel like that's a move that went under the radar. Jeff Green and Jack Londale at $8 million. Two guys, that's $16 million right there. You can just throw another team. And Jayshawn Tate at $7.6 million. Ultimately, this team has a lot of young talent, and they're going to need to make some moves if they want to capitalize on it. So I expect some of those expendable contracts to be on other teams next season. Potential targets and needs. Now, they have a couple guys that they can go after, and a lot of them are Suns, being namely Josh Okogie and Kevin Durant. Durant would have to be through a trade, but again, they really kind of have the assets to do it. They have a couple Brooklyn picks. They have their own picks, and they have like the most, in terms of young talent, rookie deals, they probably have the best rookie deal core in the league, excluding Oklahoma City. So Durant is definitely in the cards. Andre Drummond too. He's an unrestricted free agent, and I don't know if they can, woo him in with the mid-level exception. If that's not the case, they can sign and trade for him. Chicago is looking for young pieces, so I feel like this is a perfect scenario for them. Get a guy like Jayshawn Tate, and then maybe add one of those younger guys as well for Drummond's services. Taurean Prince, again, we've been mentioning him a lot. He's another bench guy. Maybe you trade a guy like Dylan Brooks in a big deal to acquire a big name, and then you bring in Prince to serve the same role pretty much at half the cost. Team needs, they need dependable veterans. Young team, it can get wild. I just feel like adding veterans to this team is the main priority, as well as backup big solutions and shooting. Biggest question, how high is the ceiling of this team? I'm very high on, the guys they have. We'll see if they work together. Maybe they caught lightning in a bottle and ripped off that win streak towards the end of last season, and they'll finish worse this season. But I really trust Ime Udoka to be a good coach. Maybe not to, treat female staffers the right way, but he's definitely a good coach, and I think the ceiling of this team is extremely high. So Utah Jazz, we're looking at a 12 seed here, and they're looking like they're going to blow it up. They went 31-51 last season, and they have a big name brand guy in Lauri Markkanen. Reported yesterday that the team is opening to trading him, and he's a guy that, there's value in him. I feel like he's definitely better than Mikal Bridges, and Mikal Bridges was worth like 6 first-round picks, so is Markkanen worth 7? If you're dealing with OKC, I think he is definitely, a lock to be like 5 first-round picks. 7 could definitely be on the table, if not more. We know what OKC is dealing with, and cap space, they have $44 million pretty much. That's 4th in the entire league. They're going to be able to be a team that's taking on salaries that other teams don't want. So, if you're in Utah, this is, full rebuilding coming. We saw them kind of stagger a little bit with the guys they got from the transactions that netted the other teams Gobert and Mitchell, but this is just a team that's, they got money and they're not going to be spending it on win-now players, it seems. In terms of present and future picks for them, they had one of the best drafts that I've seen in recent memory in terms of who they just brought in with the picks they had. They got Cody Williams at 10. He's going to be a really solid starter in the league someday, brother of OKC's Jalen Williams. Isaiah Collier at 29th. I had him going in the late teens. And Kyle Filipowski. We know the reason he dropped. If not, don't look it up. It's not worth your time. He fell to 32nd, and they picked him up. 3 guys here that they got. only one in the lottery, two of them, one of them borderline not even a second round or a first round pick, almost two second round picks here. But, you know, this is one of the best drafts that any team had this year. They're going to be a team that's going to be developing next season, and they already have a good young core. They got guys like Taylor Hendricks in there. So, team to watch in terms of development. And, they effectively own all of their own first round picks until 2031, as well as Cleveland and Minnesota picks. They have multiple of those each until 2031. They also have Los Angeles' first round pick in 2027. That would be the Lakers. Free agency, they got some guys to re-sign. Talon Horton Tucker, he's actually an interesting guy to be making like $12 million a year. He can play point guard and do a lot of other things. Chris Dunn, they got to bring back Luka Samanic as well. Micah Potter, I included him. I wasn't familiar with his game, but he made the USA Select team, I was hearing. So, maybe he's got some game to him. In terms of expendable contracts, they've got John Collins at $26.6 million. I feel like Colin Sexton is also a name to be watched, to be moved. I like him signing with Orlando, being a trade asset. Utah is going to be very interesting regardless. Potential targets. I think the biggest target they should go after is Ben Simmons, to be completely honest. And maybe spare a second round pick to give up a contract, get another name off the books, and then you might be ready to contend next season if the free agent market is nice. This is a team that can make a splash next year with all the cap space. Ben Simmons is on an expiring deal. He's at about $44 million, I believe. So get rid of him. Other potential trade targets, Kevin Huerter might be a guy you're like, okay, Sacramento, you got to get rid of this guy. Let's say they don't include him for Kuzma. He's a guy that they're going to want to get off the books and free some space for their young guards. So I like him, and Doug McDermott as well as another veteran presence you might want to add to this team. In terms of team needs, kind of unapplicable. The team is projected to tank by all accounts, but if you're going to bring in anyone, I expect it to be youth players. Summary, should not say summary, it should be their big question, but biggest question for them, how far does Danny Ainge want to blow it up? We've seen him blow it up in the past, and they still were kind of relevant in a West that was pretty tough, but I think the biggest blow up is coming here. They already got rid of their main guys a couple years back. They're going to be getting rid of Markkanen in the same fashion, and they're going to have draft picks galore, so we'll really see what goes on with them. Next team we got here is the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, they finished as the 13th seed last season, and they missed the playoffs, but it was really just a bunch of bad luck. They had a bunch of injuries. John Morant's suspension, he ultimately came back and then got injured again, so they had just a spell of bad things. They still won 27 games, however. A couple of key events. The biggest key event that I can think of is that John Morant came back, and he's looking to come back this season. This is a guy where when he's healthy and he's playing good, he's easily a top 15 player in our league. In terms of cap space, they are $22 million over the cap, but that's not that crazy. Draft picks, present and future. They had a really good draft. They got Edey at 9, where call it a reach, but they definitely need a good center alongside Jaren Jackson, and I feel like he's a guy that, complements him really well, especially there's been rumbling that, he's going to be a three-point shooter a little bit. That just definitively opens this team up to all sorts of offensive capabilities. He's also going to be a premier lob threat out of the gate for John Morant, so I like his addition. Same thing with Jalen Wells and Cam Spencer, just two guys that might play on the rotation next year, but I doubt it. They also own all of their first-round picks until 2031, with 6 second-round picks in that time frame as well. And if you are wondering why I keep mentioning 2031, that is the farthest ahead that NBA teams can trade picks. All right, players to re-sign. This team, Luke Kennard, recently I think he opted out of his player option, or they declined the team option, but it is stated that these two teams are looking to rework his deal, get him a new deal. Lamar Stevens as well, another rotation guy. This team has some, several expendable contracts, and I think these guys could be aggregated in a trade. Marcus Smart at $20.2 million. He was brought in for his, veteran presence and savviness, kind of controlling John Morant, but we didn't have any jaw incidents last year, so maybe it worked. Brandon Clark, $12.5 million too. He's rehabbing an injury too, I believe. John Conchar and Zaire Williams both at about $6 million. Add them all together, you're looking at 40-ish million. So there's some guys that you could be adding with that. Potential targets, this is the guy I'm referring to, and that's Brandon Ingram. I really like the potential addition to Brandon Ingram on this team as a guy where you got him starting, you're bringing G.G. Jackson and Vince Williams off the bench. That is, it's a luxury for sure. We saw G.G. Jackson emerge as one of the sleeper rookies last year. Markkanen, too, another guy I like to see this team add. I just want to see them make another big move, and I think they're capable of doing so. They're also not really, in bad salary cap standing, although they are over. Pretty much every team in the league is over, and Ingram's a guy where he is on an expiring deal, but maybe you give him that extension, and he, is a gritty player. He does, he's proven that he can't perform on the big stage at least the last couple of times, but maybe if he's not the first option, he, will fare better. I feel like he kind of felt he was the first option on Team USA as kind of the older veteran guy there, and we saw him get benched in some of the games. And same thing with the playoffs this past season. Really not much you can do when your best player in Zion's out. So, just a guy I like. And then Najee Marshall, too, maybe a mid-level exception guy. Stealing all the Pelicans players, I apologize if you're from New Orleans watching this video. Dario Saric, too, another bench option I like. Team needs, they need bona fide big man depth, and what I wrote down for their need is an answer if Marcus Smart isn't. If he's not the answer to what they need, I feel like they got to make a move. Ingram, if they hold on to him towards the deadline, the Pelicans is who I'm talking about. Maybe a guy you'd like to add for this team. Biggest question, will the Grizzlies stay healthy enough to make a run? I've really been thinking about this team a lot, and they were really competitive when Ja was healthy and really uncompetitive when he was not. So this is a team that I like to make a run here, and, are they one move away from being champions, potentially, is I think the ceiling for this team. All right, we're now at the bottom of the barrel here. I'm not going to bore you that much with the Spurs preview, although they are an exciting team. We did do a video on them. They were the 14th seed, and they missed the playoffs, but Wemby was named Rookie of the Year, and he was second in the Defensive Player of the Year race. They have $34 million plus in cap space as well, so could be a player there. In terms of draft picks, present and future, they had a very solid draft. They got Stephon Castle at 4th. They also picked Rob Dillingham at 8th, like we talked about, but traded him to Minnesota. They brought in Juan Nunez at 36th, Harrison Ingram at 48th. Both guys, Nunez proves to be a guy that can, get the ball to Wembanyama is basically the biggest thing you want with him. Same thing with Ingram, UNC product, just a guy that can complement the guys they already have as a bench piece. In terms of draft assets, they have all their own first-round picks and an abundance of second-round picks. We talked about that. Please, if you haven't already, check out the Spurs video we did. We appreciate the support, and, that video has been successful so far. So if you haven't seen that, be sure to go check it out. One of my favorite videos we've done. Also, if you want to see a move, please comment down below. I'm really interested to hear, by the time it goes up, it might be too late, but as free agency is happening, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about this. So, back at San Antonio, a couple guys they got to bring back. Cedi Osman, unrestricted free agent for him. Sandro Mamushkavili and David Duke are two very nice players from the Big East. Shout out to them. We know I love the Big East. They're both restricted free agents. Dominic Barlow is unrestricted. Expendable contracts, big one is Zach Collins, $16.7 million. Maybe you want to get him off the books. That is a multi-year deal. Devontae Graham is also looking at about $12 million this season, but I believe that is, waivable. In terms of targets and team needs, maybe bring back a familiar face in Kyle Anderson. The Timberwolves effectively can't bring him back, so he's a guy I like as a veteran presence. Same thing with Drew Eubanks and Tyus Jones. Tyus Jones feels like a guy that's going to be going to a contender, so I don't know about him here, but if you get him on a 4-year deal where it's, descending, where you pay him $20 million this year and $10 million 3 years down the road, I kind of like that for them. Steven Adams, maybe a guy you look to add via trade from Houston, and Tobias Harris, we talked about him. I'm urging you, please check out the San Antonio video if you are interested in this team at all. We covered all the bases with them. And Harris is a guy that we talked about. I'm not going to spoil anything in case you want to check that out, but he's a guy I like for this team. In terms of needs, they need dependable veterans like all these tanking teams. They also could use some more youth, and they're going to need non-Wemby defenders. My preview question for them is how substantial will Wembanyama's sophomore season be? if he's a guy who's averaging 30 points a game next year, this is a team that's going to be contending for a playoff spot. So maybe this offseason you prioritize growth, or maybe you just go not all in, but you look to add some assets. And we're on to our last team here, our Portland Trailblazers. So they finished last season 21-61. That finished last in the Western Conference. Couple key events, they've been bulking up Chauncey Billup's staff. He has proven that he's not a good coach thus far, but I'd like to see him turn it around because he was a proven winner as a player. I believe he made like 7 straight Eastern Conference Finals or something crazy like that. Made a couple finals in his day as well. Won a finals with the 04 Pistons. I'd like to see him reach those same peaks as a head coach, but it has not come close to happening so far. The team also traded for Denny Advia. This is a really smart move the more I think about it. They gave up Malcolm Brogdon, the 14th pick, and a future pick. The future pick is what I was hung up on, but I really like Advia as a guy that's going to have a lot more value down the road. And should they want to contend in 3 years, he's on a very, very cheap deal. They're also $35 million over the cap, so I do not expect them to be big players in free agency. So Advia is a guy that, maybe that's your big addition for the offseason. In terms of draft picks, they brought in Donovan Kling in 7th. Here's a guy that definitely could have gone higher. I like his ceiling as like a Rudy Gobert type player. Definitely has defensive wherewithal. He could develop his offensive game. This team owns all their first-round picks, and they have swap rights to several Milwaukee picks. They also have several picks from Milwaukee and Boston as a result of that Damian Lillard transaction. Free agency, they only have one guy to re-sign, and that's Justin Minaya. Just had to throw him in. Might not be the most notable guy, but he also went to Providence. Expendable contracts, DeAndre Ayton, $34 million. Now, is this a guy you look to move? I'm not quite sure, and I'm also not quite sure what team would really want him, if we're being completely honest. Maybe you send him to, say, Brooklyn for Ben Simmons. I don't even know. Tale of two evils in terms of their contracts, but Matisse Thybulle also at $11 million. Maybe a guy you look to get value out of. He still has value. In terms of potential targets and team needs, some guys I like for them: Doug McDermott, Gary Harris, Robert Covington, and Alec Burks. All of those are proven veteran guys. I think Burks is probably the most likely to end up here, whereas the other guys end up on contenders. Team needs a little bit of everything. And our biggest question for them is, what directions will the Trailblazers decide to go in? Trading for Advia is not nothing. So might this team be a team that makes a big splash and looks to rise up the ranks this season? We will see. That's all we have today. Thank you for tuning in. Remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already. We are trying our best to build this thing up, and the off season is afoot. We're getting to a very exciting time in the NBA, and I can't wait to see what our upcoming videos are, and I'm sure you guys are looking forward to that as well, looking forward to the NBA off season. Who's not excited for that? But thank you for tuning in, and if you made it this far, a double thank you to you. And we'll see you on the next video.